right. Well, hello, everyone. Big greetings from Paulus Center for Politics here at Duke University and the Sanford School. I'm 𝗙𝘂𝗹𝗶 Rose. I'm the Director of Research for Paulus, and I am delighted to welcome you this evening to our Policy Pitch Competition information session. And tonight we're going to talk through some of the specifics related to our policy pitch competition and hopefully answer any questions you might have and encourage you to submit a proposal for the competition. And we'll talk a little bit about what that will involve and the prizes that are up for grabs and that you will be vying for. So to step back a little bit, many of you are familiar with Paulus. We are the Center for Politics. Our goal is to help students at all levels, from all backgrounds, with all levels of interest in politics, with insights into major political questions and on-ramps into positions where they can make a difference in politics and public policy. We're also really interested in finding ways to connect research and evidence with policy solutions. So we love thinking big about some of the most important and pressing challenges of our day, as well as finding ways to solve those challenges. And so that's really the motivation behind our policy pitch endeavor. So I should say, a number of you are new faces. We hope you'll feel free to pop in the chat who you are, what your major is, what year you are at Duke. We're interested in getting to know members of our extended community. And I should also say, I know that we may have some political science majors in the house, some public policy majors in the house, and some people who have never experienced writing a policy pitch or doing policy work. And we're really glad you're here. So basically, in order to compete in this competition, all you need are great ideas and a willingness to put them on paper. And we can help you do that. So we'll talk a little bit later in the session about a workshop that's coming up where we can help you think through your policy pitch and get some tips for writing one. Let's see, so I want to make sure that I start from a really big and important point that this policy pitch competition is geared toward attaching solutions to major problems. And when you hear policy, we want you to think very broadly. So oftentimes we think about public policy. So programs typically implemented by a government, and those could be intended to be implemented by local leaders or local governments, state governments, federal or national level governments, and international organizations and governing bodies. But they needn't be government solutions. So they could actually be NGO solutions or business solutions, public-private solutions. So we're thinking really broadly about policy in this competition. So bear that in mind as you're thinking through the proposal that you want to offer. And the last thing I'll say is that in crafting your pitch, we will invite you to offer insight into a solution that's geared toward one of 4 areas. And so the 4 areas for this year's competition are racial justice, COVID-19 and healthcare, science and technology policy, and voting is the 4th. So the extent to which your solution fits into one of those categories, you might say, my solution is actually a bit broader and doesn't fit neatly. Well, if you make a compelling case for why your particular policy solution fits one of those areas, that is fair game. So we're excited to share some more details. We have an amazing panel of Duke students who are with us tonight who've actually come up with their own pitches last semester and can tell you a little bit about what a pitch could look like, what it might include, and their process for developing one as a team member virtually. So we'll hear from them in just a few moments. But without further ado, I'm excited to introduce the Paulus PhD fellow, Morena Martinez, who is really truly one of the major architects of this program. And she has been a driving force in helping us to design the Paulus Innovation Accelerator and the policy pitch competition. And Morena is going to share with us the specifics about what a policy pitch includes. So you'll want to take some notes on this. So Morena, over to you.
Thanks so much, Professor Rose. So as Professor Rose said, my name is Marina Martinez. I'm a PhD fellow for Paulus, and I'm going to go over some of the like logistical specifics for what this competition is going to look like. So first of all, it's a team competition. Your teams can be anywhere from 2 to 4 students. Each student can be on up to 2 teams. So let's say you have one group of friends who's interested in doing something focused on racial justice, and you have another group of friends who wants to do something related to COVID-19 and health policy. You can be on both teams, but it is a maximum of 2 teams. We're also allowed to have teams that are a mix of students in different degree programs. So if you have, if there's a graduate student you've worked with or TA'd for or RA'd for in the past and you'd like to work with them on a project, that is completely allowed. We'd love to see a couple of mixed undergraduate, graduate teams in the mix. And there'll be 2 to 4 people. Okay, so together with your team, you're going to craft a policy proposal. These proposals are going to be 2 to 3 pages, single spaced. So they're quite short, and there's kind of a lot to pack into them. So coming up with ways to present your ideas in a really concise fashion is sort of the name of the game with this project. You'll submit this proposal via a link on our website. Our website is polisinnovationaccelerator.squarespace.com. We have a tab for the competition, and it has all the details. It has all of our different themes. It has a timeline for what the competition is going to look like. And then in a few days, there will also be a link which you can click on. It'll take you to a Qualtrics form, and you'll be able to submit your proposals. In terms of timeline, we're going to conduct this competition in essentially 3 phases. So our first phase is sort of an all call. Everybody and anybody, we want you to submit your proposals. The proposal submissions are going to be due on March 4th. For this first round, all you have to submit is that 2 to 3 page proposal. And then if you do move on to our semifinals and our finals, you'll have a chance to sort of refine that proposal. So it doesn't need to be perfect for this first round, but it should be competitive because we will be selecting 6 teams to move on to the semifinals from this first submission round. So after we select our 6 teams for the semifinals, those teams are going to be paired with an alumni mentor. That mentor can help you refine your proposals, give you suggestions. You can ask them questions on how you can make it better. And you're also going to work with them to prepare a 6 to 8 minute recorded presentation where you're it's sort of a Shark Tank-esque type presentation. You're going to try to convince a panel of judges why they should support the proposal that you're putting forth. So a revised copy of the proposal and that recorded presentation will be due for semifinalists on March 25th. And then we will have a panel of judges review those submissions, and then we will finally cut it down to our top 3 teams. Our top 3 teams will have another opportunity to revise and resubmit their materials, and then our whole competition is sort of going to culminate in an event on April 15th from 6 to 7 p.m. You'll give a really short pitch of our finalists will give a really short pitch of their presentation to a live Zoom audience. And then at the end of the event, we will be announcing our winners and awarding our prizes. So that's sort of a brief sketch of what the competition is going to look like. The really important thing to keep in mind is that the first deadline is March 4th, and all we need from you if you're interested in entering is that 2 to 3 page proposal. We will also have an opportunity for you to work on those proposals and sort of get feedback from us before the deadline. So on February 13th, towards the end of the event, I'll also post the registration link in the chat. But if you want to mark your calendars now, on February 16th, from 6 to 7 p.m., we'll have a proposal workshop. So if you and your team are working on a couple of ideas, you can go ahead and bring them to the workshop. We'll go into breakout rooms and you can get some feedback on how it's going and things like that. So those are the general logistics for what the competition is going to look like. I believe Angela had posted in the chat, but if you have any questions, clarifying questions, anything you want more information on, you can go ahead and send that via chat to Angela Chung, and then she will read out all of the questions at the end of the session for a Q&A. Thank you, Professor Rose.
Thank you so much, Marina, for that wonderful overview. And I should mention that, you know, the prizes for this competition, I think, are pretty darn exciting. So for the the winning team that makes it through that final round and is announced on April 15th in that live event, each member of that team will receive $1,000. And we will also have additional prizes that will be revealed in the coming weeks. So please stay tuned for what the full roster of prizes will involve. But again, you know, very exciting prize options. And we're hoping that all members of the Duke community, undergraduates, graduates, professional students, all feel excited about this and welcome and invited to participate. So a really quick point about substance and content for the policy pitches. And then I'm excited to introduce a panel of students who have some experience developing these. So what are we looking for? You know, again, as I mentioned at the top of the meeting, we're looking for bold solutions for big problems. And so we're hoping that you will feel licensed and take license to be creative and think about a problem that you know, that really means a lot to you, that you're really interested in working to solve, and then developing a solution that has the capacity to make a real difference. So in particular, we're looking for proposals that fit into those 4 categories that we've identified for this year, that also offer a promising solution, but one that's also feasible. So you want to think, you know, of course, about thinking big and really thinking outside of the box, but you also want to craft a proposal that could potentially get done. In thinking up your proposal, we also encourage you to think very carefully about the scope of your impact. So, you know, you might think, okay, we want something that's going to have a major effect on the largest number of people possible. And I would suggest thinking seriously about the scope as well as the significance of your impact. So you could have an impact that is broadly disseminated across broad populations, or you could have a solution that makes a major difference for a somewhat targeted group. So there are some trade-offs there, but you really want to think about the impact that your solution will have or can have. And then finally, you'll think about, I'd say the best proposals will think about a number of issues such as implementation. So how will this actually work on the ground and who will get it done? Thinking about the resources that are necessary to make it happen and to make it effective. Thinking about how your proposed solution will fit with the existing policy scape or, you know, existing challenges on the policy or political landscape. And I'd like to underscore that final item of politics. So the best proposals are those that are aware of the political context and how politics can shape your capacity to develop a really powerful proposal. So are there things that you might want to pay attention to and weave into your pitch that will help to generate interest in or support for your proposal, or things that might actually help to neutralize opposition to that proposal? So those are some of the things that you'll want to think about. And now I'm very excited to introduce a group of panelists, an all-star panel of MPPs who are welcome to share their video right now if they can. And so we have with us Matthew Curtis, Gia DeHart, and Isabel Shapiro, who have crafted policy pitches. They're experts at this point and are willing to share with us some of their experiences from doing this and some tips and insights that you might find useful. And at the end of this panel discussion, we're going to open it up for questions for our panelists or broader questions about the competition. So to start us off, panel, I would first of all say thank you so much for being with us tonight. We're excited to learn from you. And if you would, give us a sense of the policy pitch that you developed last term and And we'd love to hear, what was the category that your proposal fit into, and what was your solution? And so maybe I'll start with you, Gia.
I knew you were going to start with me first. Thank you, for Professor Rose. And just to the audience, I apologize if there's background noise. I have two wild children in the background. My group, we focused on voting, and we were specifically working with North Carolina because that's where we are. And so in order to figure out how to fix something in voting, we had to decide what the problem was. So we just did some research on voting issues in North Carolina, and we zeroed in on increasing the Latinx vote in North Carolina, specifically with the youth population. And so we implemented what we called the Future Voters Act of 2021, which provided what we call a political passport to be included in an existing civic and economics course in North Carolina to help teach students about the voting process. And then we also implemented a grant program that would partner with local existing nonprofits in North Carolina that work with the Latinx community in order to try to increase civic engagement. The biggest point that I'd like to convey to people who are online is that you can have a problem that you're trying to solve, but I think you have to convey why does it matter? So why does it matter if we increase the voter turnout in youth voters in North Carolina? So we dug into the data and we showed what, if we increase the youth vote in North Carolina, how it could tip elections. And we also dug into population trends with the Latinx population in North Carolina and how quickly it's growing and how that could shift the political landscape in the future. Regarding, Professor Rose mentioned resources and she mentioned political feasibility. And so in order to, we just came up with a dollar amount because we weren't restricted by money for our grant program, but we based that dollar amount on existing programs in the state of North Carolina to convey where we thought our dollar amount was feasible. And for the political feasibility, we looked at, the state of North Carolina in the General Assembly, and we also looked at voting trends in the Latinx population. And specifically, the Latinx population does not vote as one block. And so we leveraged, we leveraged that in our political feasibility for why we thought that it could gain bipartisan support.
Thank you so much, Gia. So now I'll turn it over to Matthew.
All right, hi everybody. So the memo that me and my wonderful team worked on was centered around racial justice. And we decided to focus on the housing aspect of racial justice and specifically focus on Durham because first of all, that's obviously where we all are, or at the very least the vast majority of us all are. And that's where we're studying, but also because Durham has a significant and growing housing problem between gentrification and outside investors buying up housing and racial segregation. So we decided to make ensuring that lower income Black and brown Durhamites were able to afford to be able to live in Durham, basically a racial justice issue that tied in with the events from 2020, whether it's the George Floyd protests and the spotlight on racial justice that came from that, or the pandemic itself, which was actually an angle that one of my teammates thought of that I hadn't considered. But the fact that just not having stable, healthy housing is a public health pandemic threat unto itself because you can't quarantine or follow guidelines if you don't have a house, a decent house to quarantine in. So basically, what we decided to do was do a series of solutions based around zoning, around vouchers and tax breaks to allow Durhamites to stay in their homes or to, if necessary, be able to stay in the neighborhoods in which they live. And then a long-term zoning plan to basically make it easier to build houses in middle-class parts of Durham, and then eventually to allow for multifamily homes to be built throughout the city. And I would say the big takeaway that I learned, in addition to what Gia said, is that there's always going to be interesting solutions out there. I think feasibility matters, and obviously the political will aspect matters. But I would say pick a few solutions, maybe even just one, depending on what you're doing, and then really dive deep into it. You're much better off doing that than trying to do the whole menu, because we came across 20-25 different ideas ranging from get rid of single family zoning down to like tax breaks for landlords who build affordable housing. And I think one key is decide early on which couple of options you're going to focus on, and then go dive deep into each of those. And also, before you do that, make sure you specifically and very clearly identify the problem. So.
Thank you so much, Matthew. And finally, 𝗱𝗲𝗹𝗶, what did you work on?
Our team worked on eliminating school resource officers from Wake County Public Schools. And we sort of started because our team had keyed into the political will that had been generated by a lot of student organizing happening in Wake County, as well as defund the police movements for the past 4 years, and especially over the summer. And we sort of looked at those two things and said, well, if we hop on all of the organizing work on the ground and build on that with policy solutions, essentially there's going to be a pot of money that comes from eliminating those school resource officers. And we wanted to find a solution to the problem of safety in schools and start to address an actually equitable form of school safety. So we settled on restorative justice through that. And yeah, I think to add to Gia and Matthew also, like one of the things, the important things that we considered was at what level are people making decisions about this? Who do we need to convince? Who are our stakeholders for this in particular? Because, we could talk, our team loves the defund the police movement, I will say, and we could have talked a lot about that. Ultimately, we needed to focus in on the parents who would be involved, the school board, the kids, and getting teachers to commit as a part of successful implementation that comes with restorative justice. But yeah, we started a lot with a funding question and making sure that the money was available so that when we struggled with other implementation issues, specifically with racial justice, it's the problem mostly is developing community buy-in, that we wouldn't have to worry about the money at least. So that is how we started and proceeded.
Well, I sure do appreciate that insight into how you went from, joining together with a new team to thinking through what issue you wanted to address, what solution you wanted to develop, and then the process for making that happen. I'm really curious if you could talk a little bit to that, the teamwork aspect of things. So how did you work together with your team, especially in this virtual working context? Any tips for our attendees here, and maybe even especially specifically, were you using Google Docs? Are there things that you would recommend, like, oh, you all really need a Slack channel? Would love to hear a little bit about that teamwork process.
I will kick us off here. You need some form of communication that you've decided on, some platform. So whether that's Slack, Teams, if you guys love getting a million emails in a row, I don't know most people who do. If you're going to be on a text chain, whatever it is, deciding that early and in advance and being in touch. We started out with an outline of our sections of which we needed the why is this a problem section. Let's see, let me look at my why is it a problem? How are we going to develop criteria for a solution? Why does the solution we picked suit those criteria? What is the political feasibility and landscape? And then cost implementation and general definitions throughout. So we started out by breaking those sections up, spreading them out, communicating consistently, setting a time when we would have those sections done. And then our team chose to do editing all together at once. So we opened up a Google Doc and we went through word by word, just all of us poring over it together. And that was, useful for our team. I've worked on other teams that do editing in shifts where one person will take the first shift and then they'll send it to another person who will just, and that is more based on trust of your team members and just saying, okay, we trust each other and I know that you're going to make really good choices. And it's also sometimes from an aversion to track changes and all of the comments and things on track changes, which are not necessarily attractive to look at. But yeah, so those are a couple pieces of advice.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Isabel. How about Gia and Matthew?
I'm partial to teams, so I'm just going to put that out there and say you need to get on the teams train. Regarding how we got started, so we surveyed the landscape first of voting, and then we said, okay, there's this huge gap, a 30% gap between youth voters and voters age, I think 45 to 60 something, and we started digging into that. And once we latched on to wanting to focus on the Latinx community, we started writing. And then when we got to political feasibility, we thought, okay, if this group is being left out of the political discussion, why are the political leaders going to pay for a program and vote for a program to help this marginalized group? So that's where we then brought it back a little bit bigger and said, let's look at youth voters as a whole, and then find a way to like tack on a focus, because if we're helping all youth voters, there will be some spillover effects to marginalized communities, and then we can see if we can do this extra program specifically focused on Latinx voters. So that's how we got to our solution. For the writing, we had two people who did a lot of the research, and we just had to document, research. Once we had our potential solution, then we had, document research two, where we were specifically researching all of the data we needed to support our proposed solution. And then we divvied up the writing based on our strengths and weaknesses. I'm more of a visual person, and we were recommending that schools use this political passport, which is like a checklist that takes students through learning about the political process in a hands-on way. And so I was the person who actually designed that so we can add a visual element to our proposal. Others, you have the people who like to get started writing right away. So we had them get started writing right away. And then the people who are slower to start were more of the copy editors to make sure that it's all one voice. And my group, we already knew each other. So we had that element of trust, and we took more of the approach of trust your teammates, edit it, make the changes. And at the very end, we all did one final read through to make sure we had no disagreements before submitting.
Thank you so much, Gia. And Matthew, last word on that.
So yeah, I would say our process looked a lot like that too. One of the big things we did at the start was we decided we were going to do a racial justice topic almost right away. And then we probably threw around 5 or 6 different ideas before settling on housing. We talked about mostly economic empowerment ideas, a reparations idea, but we sort of settled on housing because a couple of us felt particularly comfortable with that. And because a couple of us felt more comfortable than the others, we took the initial lead on research. The two of us basically went and found as many articles as we could. And then over the course of a few days, we all read through and then decided what everyone felt most comfortable with. So one person focused on the legal side and what had already been done. Two of us split the ideas. One person I did the ideas based around zoning, and the other one did the ideas based around stuff that already helped residents in their homes. And the other one focused on sort of laying the scene, talking about the health aspects and all of that. And basically, we all did our own outlines. We probably met once every few days, probably about 3 times a week, and we used Teams as well. But we also had a text chain there. If there were quick questions or just check-ins to see how everyone was doing, we would use that. And then we wrote our document in Teams, and both our outline, which was a group effort, and our initial memo, and then we all had a meeting to do edits. And I would say for the final copy, we had 2 people do the bulk of the writing, and the person who had the shortest section also took the lead on the associated PowerPoint presentation. And we were pretty collaborative with that, but there there was always a lead person who was doing a little bit more, having a little bit more responsibility for each part. But as for cohesiveness, I would definitely agree with choose a platform, get everyone's schedule, like get a sense for when everyone can meet and like what everyone's preferred meeting approach is, whether or not, obviously it's almost all going to be virtual now, but times and just basically figure out what everyone's comfortable with work style wise and see what everyone's strength is or how comfortable they feel about various aspects of the topic and go from there.
Excellent, thank you. And a quick point on that. So for phase one, your policy pitches will be simply the 2 to 3 page proposals that Marina mentioned. But then for teams that advance to the semifinals, then we'll talk about an additional added like elevator pitch style video that you all will also include. And again, you'll have the support of mentors and resources that we help to provide you with at that point. So stay tuned for more information there for the teams that advance to the semifinals. I have one final question for the panel, but I want to open it up to the broader group for questions. So I hope all of our audience members will be thinking about any questions you might have for us, because we're going to turn to you for your questions in just a moment after this one final quick question from our panelists. Panelists, is there anything that you learned at the end of your policy pitch crafting process that you wish you'd known at the beginning? Or any advice, one thing that you would love to share for those who are thinking about crafting a pitch?
I have one. Make sure, one of the reasons we had to throw out a couple of solutions, make sure your solution is legal from the get-go. Like in the brainstorming process, go through and make sure that your solution is actually feasible. Because we had a couple of ideas that we had started to flesh into, and then we looked into state law and realized that they probably wouldn't be doable. So I would say either through legal or financial constraints, make sure early on that you can actually do what you're proposing.
I love that. Other tips?
So we, for class, we had to present, and we knew there was going to be a Q&A. And we said, well, where's this money going to come from? And we said, oh, well, it doesn't really matter because it's pretend money. And so we had a justification for the dollar amount that we wanted for our program, but we didn't do any digging into how the funding sources work in the state of North Carolina. So even though we expected that question, we didn't research it. And so I think my piece of advice would be attack your policy proposal and criticize it as if you were going to vote against it, and then figure out a way to address those concerns in your policy proposal. I think that was more of a timing issue for us, but if you're going to enter the competition, I would recommend arguing against your proposal and then going back through a second time to address those concerns.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gia. Any final wisdom, Isabel?
I think those are just great points from Gia and Matthew. I think, having a little bit more time, it would have been nice to really dive into some alternative solutions and make sure that we were offering the absolute best form of the argument for the people that for our audience, just with every single section, and really putting more emphasis on the solution part. I think we got a little in the weeds with wanting to talk a lot about the problem. And I think we could have used our real estate there a little bit more efficiently if we had cut to the point with the problem and spent more time really ironing out all of the ins and outs of our solution and our implementation process.
I love that. Thank you. And that's a reminder. One final point that I should make about this competition is you might be wondering, well, who's the target audience? I know for people who maybe have written policy memos, you might be thinking, in some cases I've written for a person I've designated, like maybe I'm targeting this to a member of Congress or a member of the United Nations or a member of the state legislature. For this, our judges are truly, the audience that you're writing for. So these are generalists, people who are knowledgeable about public policy, but maybe aren't necessarily working in the specific interest, the specific area that you're interested in, but it's really providing a pitch that is informative and feasible and compelling to someone who is well-versed in public policy and really evaluating your argument based on how well you make a case that this particular solution can indeed address the problem that you're highlighting, and that it's feasible and that it incorporates, a great deal of insight into feasibility, resources required, the political landscape, and other important dynamics that you'll want to consider when you're thinking about putting it into motion. So panelists, thank you so, so very much. And now I will open it up. Maybe I'll ask Morena to join us again. And then let's go to our audience for questions. Angela, is Angela still in the house?
She is, but I actually got just two. I think she has the bulk of them, but I got two questions sent to me. The first is specific criteria for the initial memo and detailed instructions for the competition. There will be a rubric and the link to submit proposals up on that website by the end of tomorrow, because it's the end of the week. So I'll have those up tomorrow in terms of just basic details, 2 to 3 pages, single spaced, Times New Roman, 12, 1-inch margins. And then on the rubric, you'll see that we're just asking for 3 parts to the proposal. The first is the problem statement. Tell us what the problem is, tell us why it's important, and it demands a solution. Part 2 is the solution. Give us your solution as detailed as possible, what it's going to be, who it's going to target, what are the costs, what are the benefits. Give us all those good details. And then last but not least, for that last third section is going to be thinking about the political feasibility. So like a lot of our panelists have talked about, think about, all right, how are we going to present this to Republicans and Democrats alike? What is our best argument for why this should have people's support? What are the odds of us being able to pass something like this, given what American politics looks like right now? So those are the 3 sections. Those are like the basics. All of this information and the rubric that we'll be using to train our judges will be up on the website tomorrow.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Morena. And we should also say, like, in terms of the scope of your solution, or, if you're endeavoring to take an international approach, we welcome that. So definitely like politics at multiple levels. So if you're interested in sort of international politics and policy, if you're thinking about local and state, if you're thinking about national, federal, totally up to you. And we invite proposals that grapple with any of those levels. I'll also say, we're inviting you to be creative here. So don't feel like this is a memo that you're writing for a particular policy class. Many of our entrants will not be policy majors, will not have that experience of writing policy memos. So we're hoping that once you get these guidelines with these general criteria that Morena outlined, that you will feel free to really be creative, to use your real estate strategically, to emphasize what you find most important and compelling in building your proposal. So thank you so much for those, Morena. Any additional questions?
So there are a couple more questions that I received. First is just a really easy question. We're recording this information session right now, and some people are wondering where they can access this recording later.
Thank you for that. Great question. So we are indeed recording. We will post this on the Polis Innovation Accelerator competition website, and we will make sure that you can access it through the Polis homepage. So check us out at polis.duke.edu. And so please stay tuned. Also, we'll be sending it out in Polis's newsletter, which will be coming out soon. So if you are not yet connected to Polis's newsletter, I'm hoping that we can put in the chat a link for you to sign up. So we hope you will sign up for our newsletter and stay in touch with Polis, and we can keep you apprised of any projects, any developments, programming that we're working on, including this one.
And we have already answered some questions about like the general format of the proposals, but some people are wondering if they can include figures or visual elements, and if how that factors into the page limit.
Excellent question. So you are more than welcome to include visuals. And I would say, typically citations do not count against your page limit. So if you're using endnotes, for example, those will not count against you. If it's, 2 to 3 pages, double space, single space for your policy pitch, but then an additional space that includes some citations. Figures you do want to include as parts of that 2 to 3 page limit. So do bear in mind that you want to be strategic in any figures that you incorporate in that first pitch. Excellent question.
And going again from the format, there are some people wondering if there is a sample proposal that Polis could show so that people I'm assuming this is more for people who have really no experience in looking at any policy proposals at all. So if we have something like that.
Yes, so we are working to find a sample. One of the tricky things is for many students who have developed them, they're planning to submit them to the competition. So we're working to get one that can be used as a sample, but absolutely. So please stay tuned for that in the website.
And another question I'm seeing is, what advice are there in terms of researching, writing, or finding teammates for people who have no experience in policy?
Oh, it's a great question. So one, we will have a workshop coming down the pipeline. I believe, Marina, it's February 16th. Is that the right date? February 16th. And we will share information about that, hopefully in the chat, so that you'll know where you can find us to have a longer discussion about writing, about, crafting a policy pitch. And I would say that, let's see, Angela, can you repeat for me the first part of that question?
What advice is there in terms of researching, writing, and then finding teammates for people who have no experience?
Thank you for the question about finding teammates. So, we actually definitely encourage you to think about your network broadly. So if you have classmates who love politics and policy, or friends and classmates who do not, reach out to people broadly in your network. And if you're interested in connecting with others, we'd invite you to, I'm not sure if our attendees can chat with each other right now, but it would be great if you're someone who's looking for a partner for this pitch proposal project, you could put your name in the chat. And what you could do, even if you can chat directly with us, we can help connect you. We'll create a list if we can.
I also just opened up the chat to everyone publicly. If you are looking for a partner or a team and you don't have one yet, you can go ahead and post it in the chat now, and we can see if we can make any connections with our last 15 minutes here. And then if you're still having troubles finding someone, we can go ahead and gather up some names. If after the session is over, you're still having some troubles finding a teammate, you can email polis@duke.edu, and we'll go ahead and collect a list of names and put an email together. So hopefully make some connections between some people who are looking for a team.
Thank you so much, Marina. And thank you for all of these questions. These are fantastic. Any more, Angela?
I think these were answered earlier, but I guess I want to reemphasize, because there were a couple people who asked this, that these proposals do not have to be concerned with North Carolina, and they could be federal, national, or international level.
Yeah, thank you for raising that again. And we'd like to underscore you have a lot of latitude in the scope of your proposal, the sort of targeted level of government or non-government. So it could be North Carolina centered, it could be not North Carolina centered. It could be, if you want to focus on a different state, if you want to focus on a different country, if you want to focus on a particular city or a county, if you want to focus on a business solution or an NGO solution, totally up to you.
Okay, I don't see any new questions currently, but if anyone does have more questions, you definitely can put them in the chat.
Thank you so much. And Angela, thank you so much for facilitating our Q&A session. Everyone, it's been so wonderful to chat with you about this policy pitch competition. Panelists, thank you so much for sharing your amazing insights. I feel like there were so many valuable tips that you've shared. To all of the attendees who have questions and share those questions in the chat, thank you for those questions. And I would again encourage you to stay tuned for additional information on our website for the competition, additional competition information, specifics, sample proposal that you can look at, information about prizes as additional prizes come online. If you have other questions, please feel free to send them my way, deandra.rose@duke.edu. And you can also reach our Polis team, polis@duke.edu. And I think that's all. So team, if I've forgotten anything, please let me know, or we will say goodbye. And thanks to everyone for being with us tonight. We're so excited. We hope that you will submit your policy pitch. Again, the winning team, every member on that team gets $1,000, and there will be additional prizes, an opportunity to connect with some pretty inspiring judges and mentors. And I think it'll be a lot of fun. All right, everybody, thank you very much. Take care. See you soon.